So let's start by focusing on the how we're managing state on the client. And we're doing that in this case through a Redux store. And the Redux store is really simple. We've just got a store where we are combining reducers. And this reducer really has one action, which is going to set the authenticated user. And let's take a look and see, how this ends up working. Now I'm taking my actions and I'm actually putting them on one actions object just to differentiate between what actions we'll have when we end up mapping dispatch to props and the actions themselves, which are going to be our thunks. So let's take a look first of all at this first one, which is an action that's attempting a login. And we can see that it's got the form of a thunk in the sense that when we call this function, we're going to pass in a username. We're also going to pass in our history object, and we're going to attempt to log in. It's a very simplistic login. Eventually, we'd end up putting in a username and password, but we're making a post request to an API route for sessions where we're going to end up passing in a username, and if we're successful, we're going to end up setting our auth. So our Redux store is going to end up changing. On top of that, no matter what route we're on, we're actually going to end up going back to the main page. So this is one thunk that's going to end up calling this action. The other thunk that we have here is a little bit different because what happens if the user ends up logging in and they do a hard reload of the page? Well, we want to go up to the server and say, hey, look, if you're logged in, we should have a cookie that's set. We're going to go up to the server and we're going to call a different route. We're not going to post to create the session, but we're going to end up getting the session here. And actually, looking at this, I think this is actually even superfluous. I'm going to just take this out. I don't think we need it. Because you know what? There's no credentials that have to end up getting passed if, in fact, we already have the user that's in the session. We could actually just test out whether or not this is actually accurate. And this actually works the same way. So there's a little typo on my part here. So this thunk is going to get used. Hey, look, you already logged in. You have a cookie that's set, but there's a hard reload. And you don't want to make the user log in again. So we'll go and use that cookie to find out who that user is, and we'll end up setting this off. To log out, we're going to want to go up to the server to end up destroying the session. And here we're going to set our auth. Now again, instead of setting our auth object to null, we'll determine whether a user is logged in by looking at our store, looking at that auth object. And if that auth object actually has an ID, if it's not an empty object, we'll know that the user logged in. So here we're just focusing on our store. And granted, all this is in one file. We would eventually end up separating these things out. But these are the three thunks. Again, this would be sort of logging in from a form. This would be attempting a login on a hard reload. And this would be logging out. And all three of these thunks end up interacting with our Redux store. So the next thing we'll take a look at is how these thunks end up getting used on the front end.